She was just a waitress. He was a billionaire who could buy and sell her entire world with pocket change. When he insulted her in a foreign language, thinking she was too stupid to understand, he made the biggest mistake of his life. Because what he didn't know was that this simple waitress was hiding a secret that would destroy his arrogance in less than 60 seconds. This is the true story of how one perfect sentence, spoken in flawless Japanese, turned a powerful man's world completely upside down. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why the quietest people in the room are often the most dangerous. Stay with me, because what happens next will give you chills. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. You know, sometimes life puts us in places where we feel invisible, where people look right through us like we're nothing more than part of the furniture. That's exactly where Sarah Williams found herself every single day. Sarah was 24 years old, working at a fancy restaurant in London called the Royal Table. It was one of those places where the rich and powerful came to eat, where a single meal could cost more than Sarah made in a week. The chandeliers sparkled like diamonds, the carpet was so thick your feet sank into it, and every plate that left the kitchen looked like a work of art. But for Sarah, it wasn't glamorous at all. It was survival. Every morning, she'd wake up in her tiny flat in East London, the kind of place where you could hear your neighbors through the walls and the heating never quite worked properly. She'd put on her crisp black uniform, tie her dark hair back in a neat bun, and head to the underground. 2 trains and 40 minutes later, she'd arrive at the Royal Table, ready for another shift that would leave her feet aching and her spirit tired. What most people didn't know about Sarah was that she had a secret life. When she wasn't carrying plates and pouring wine, she was a student at London University, studying languages. Not just 1 or 2 languages either. Sarah could speak French like a Parisian, Spanish like someone from Madrid, and Mandarin well enough to hold a proper conversation. But her real gift was Japanese. She'd spent a year in Tokyo on a scholarship, living with a host family, studying at one of Japan's top universities, immersing herself completely in the language and culture. She'd fallen in love with everything about it. The way the language could be so polite and formal, or warm and friendly, depending on how you used it. The subtle ways people communicated respect and emotion through their words. She'd written her entire university thesis on it. But none of that mattered at the Royal Table. There, she was just another waitress. Just another pair of hands to serve the wealthy people who never really looked at her face. Her manager, Mr. Peterson, was a nervous, sweaty man who cared more about impressing rich customers than treating his staff like human beings. He'd panic at the smallest thing, a fork in the wrong place, a napkin folded incorrectly, and he'd take it out on whoever was nearby. Sarah had learned to keep her head down and stay out of his way. Then there was Victoria. Victoria had worked at the restaurant for 6 years and treated the place like it was her personal kingdom. She had sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that never quite reached those eyes. From the moment Sarah started working there, Victoria saw her as a threat. Sarah was younger, quicker, and the customers seemed to like her genuine warmth. Victoria couldn't stand it. So Victoria made Sarah's life difficult in small, cruel ways. She'd give Sarah the worst tables, the most demanding customers. She'd forget to tell Sarah when an order was ready, making her look slow and incompetent. She'd whisper to the other staff members, spreading little rumors and lies. Nothing Sarah could complain about directly, but enough to make every shift feel like walking through a minefield. Sarah endured it all because she had no choice. The money from this job paid for her university fees, her rent, her food. She was so close to finishing her degree, so close to a better future. She just had to hold on a little longer. On this particular Tuesday evening, something was different. Sarah could feel the tension in the air the moment she arrived for her shift. Mr. Peterson was practically vibrating with anxiety, his face even more red than usual. The other staff members were whispering urgently to each other. "What's going on?" Sarah asked one of the kitchen staff. "Haven't you heard?" he said, his eyes wide. "Takashi Yamamoto is coming tonight." The Takashi Yamamoto. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Everyone knew that name. Takashi Yamamoto was a Japanese real estate magnate, one of the richest men in Asia. He'd built an empire buying and developing properties across the world, from Tokyo to New York to London. He was known for 2 things, his brilliant business mind and his absolutely terrifying temper. The newspapers loved to write about him. They called him the Ice Emperor because of his cold, calculating way of doing business and his reputation for destroying anyone who got in his way. Mr. Peterson gathered all the staff in the kitchen, his hands shaking slightly. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice tight. "Mr. Yamamoto has reserved our best table for tonight. This is the most important booking we've had all year. Everything must be absolutely perfect. Perfect. Do you understand?" Everyone nodded. Then Mr. Peterson's eyes landed on Sarah. "Williams, you'll be serving table 7. His table." Sarah felt her stomach drop. Table 7 was right in the center of the dining room, the most visible table in the restaurant. She glanced over at Victoria, who was smirking, her arms crossed. This was a setup. Either Sarah would fail spectacularly in front of everyone, or she'd somehow succeed and Victoria would find another way to make her pay for it. "Sir, perhaps someone with more experience," Sarah began, but Mr. Peterson cut her off. "I've made my decision, Williams. Don't disappoint me." As Sarah straightened her apron and took a deep breath, she had no idea that the next few hours would change everything. That her hidden knowledge, the language skills she'd worked so hard to develop, would become the key to the most important moment of her life. The clock on the wall ticked toward 7 o'clock. The storm was coming. At exactly 7 o'clock, the front doors of the royal table opened, and Takashi Yamamoto walked in. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. He was a man in his late 50s, tall and lean, wearing a suit so perfectly tailored it probably cost more than a car. His black hair was streaked with distinguished gray at the temples, and his face was set in an expression of cool displeasure, as if everything around him was slightly beneath his standards. But it was his eyes that really got your attention, dark and sharp, like a hawk searching for prey. He wasn't alone. 2 younger men flanked him, both Japanese, both wearing expensive suits that didn't quite match the quality of their bosses. They looked nervous, their shoulders tight, their smiles forced. These were junior executives from his company, Sarah realized. Men who'd learned that being close to Takashi Yamamoto was both an incredible opportunity and a constant test of survival. Mr. Peterson practically ran to greet them, bowing so deeply Sarah thought he might fall over. "Mr. Yamamoto, welcome, welcome. What an absolute honor to have you dining with us this evening." Yamamoto's cold gaze swept over the manager like he was examining an insect. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't smile. He simply said in heavily accented English, "My table." It wasn't a question. It was a command. Of course. Right this way, sir." Mr. Peterson gestured frantically toward table 7, leading the group across the dining room. Other diners turned to look, whispering to each other. Everyone recognized him. Sarah watched them approach, her heart pounding hard against her ribs. She'd served difficult customers before. Celebrities, politicians, wealthy business people who treated service staff like they were invisible. But this felt different. There was something about Yamamoto's presence that filled the room with ice. As Mr. Peterson seated them, he gestured towards Sarah with a flourish. "And this is Sarah, Mr. Yamamoto. She'll be taking care of you this evening. She's one of our finest servers." Sarah stepped forward, her professional smile fixed on her face. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the royal table." Yamamoto's eyes flicked to her for just a second. In that brief moment, Sarah felt herself being assessed, categorized, and dismissed. She might as well have been a chair or a lamp. His 2 associates didn't even look at her at all. She handed them the leather-bound menus, her hands steady despite her nerves. Yamamoto took his without a word, without any acknowledgement that she was even a person standing there. And so it began. From the very first moment, Takashi Yamamoto was impossible to please. He studied the wine list with a deep frown, then asked Sarah technical questions about the vintages that were clearly designed to trip her up. But Sarah had spent 3 years working in restaurants. She knew her wines. She answered each question calmly and accurately. She could see a flash of irritation in his eyes when she got every answer right. He ordered an appetizer, and when she brought it out, a beautiful arrangement of seared scallops with a delicate sauce, he took one bite and pushed the plate away. "Overcooked," he said flatly. "Take it back." Sarah didn't argue. "Of course, sir. I'll speak to the chef immediately." The second appetizer came out. This time he ate it in silence, but his expression made it clear he wasn't impressed. His 2 associates, watching his every reaction, quickly agreed with everything he said. "Yes, not quite right," one of them murmured. "Could be better," said the other. As the evening went on, Yamamoto found fault with everything. The lighting was too bright. The music was irritating. The table was too close to the door. Each complaint was delivered in that same cold, flat tone, never raising his voice, which somehow made it worse. Sarah handled each issue with grace, apologizing sincerely, fixing what could be fixed, and enduring what couldn't be. Across the dining room, Victoria was watching with barely concealed glee. Every time Sarah had to return to the kitchen with a complaint, Victoria would smirk and whisper to the other servers. Sarah could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her. The main courses arrived. Sarah carried them carefully to the table, 3 plates of the restaurant's signature dish, a perfectly cooked beef tenderloin with seasonal vegetables. She moved to place the first plate in front of Yamamoto, her movements practiced and precise. But at that exact moment, one of the executives gestured dramatically while speaking, trying to agree with something his boss had said. His hand hit the edge of the table, just hard enough to make it shake. It was the tiniest movement, but it was enough. A single drop of water from the pitcher in Sarah's hand fell through the air and landed on the sleeve of Takashi Yamamoto's immaculate suit jacket. The world stopped. Yamamoto froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. Slowly, so slowly, he lowered it back to the table. He stared down at the tiny dark spot on his sleeve, a spot so small most people wouldn't even notice it. But to him, it might as well have been a huge stain. "I am so sorry, sir," Sarah said immediately, reaching for a clean napkin. "Please let me." Yamamoto held up one hand, stopping her mid-sentence. He didn't look at her. He just stared at that tiny spot on his sleeve, his jaw tightening. Then, still not looking at Sarah, believing she was just another ignorant English server who couldn't understand anything beyond her own language, Takashi Yamamoto turned to his 2 associates and began speaking in rapid Japanese. What he said was absolutely devastating. The Japanese words flowed from Yamamoto's mouth like venom, smooth and casual. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. The contempt in his voice was enough. If you translated what he said into English, it would go something like this. "Look at this clumsy girl. They hire these people based on their looks and call it service. She probably has the intelligence of a child. All she's good for is standing there looking pretty. Completely useless." His 2 executives immediately laughed, nervous, eager to please laughs. They were performing for their boss, showing him they agreed, that they were on his side. They looked at Sarah with pity and disdain, comfortable in their secret language, confident that she had no idea what had just been said about her. But they were wrong. Sarah understood every single word. Every hateful syllable landed in her mind with perfect, crystal clarity. The formal Japanese structure, the specific words he'd chosen to demean her, the casual cruelty of a powerful man who thought himself untouchable. She understood not just the words, but the deep disrespect behind them, the way he'd reduced her to nothing more than a decoration, an object without thoughts or feelings. For a long moment, Sarah just stood there, the water pitcher still in her hand. To everyone watching, Mr. Peterson hovering nearby, Victoria watching from across the room, the other diners trying not to stare, it just looked like a waitress standing quietly by while customers spoke in a foreign language. But inside Sarah, something was breaking. Or maybe something was finally breaking free. She thought about every time someone had looked through her like she wasn't there. Every condescending comment from Victoria. Every moment she'd had to smile and nod while being treated as less than human. Every shift where her aching feet and tired mind were just the price she paid to chase her dreams. She thought about the year she'd spent in Tokyo, living with the Tanaka family who'd welcomed her like a daughter. Learning not just the language, but the culture, the respect, the deep appreciation for courtesy and dignity that was woven into every interaction. She'd fallen in love with Japan, with its beauty and depth. And here was this man, using her beloved language as a weapon, turning it into something ugly. The professional smile faded from Sarah's face. Her spine straightened. It was a subtle shift, but it changed everything about her posture. She was no longer a deferential server. She was a woman who'd had enough. She carefully placed the water pitcher on the side table. The 2 executives were still chuckling, enjoying their boss's joke. Yamamoto was examining his sleeve with theatrical disgust, playing up the moment. Then Sarah spoke, and she spoke in perfect, flawless Japanese. Her accent was Tokyo standard, the kind you'd hear from a university professor or a news broadcaster. Every word was precisely chosen, grammatically perfect, delivered with a calm, steady confidence that cut through the room like a bell. In English, what she said was this: Sir, your assumption that my profession reflects my intelligence is as flawed as your understanding of basic human respect. Perhaps someone of your business success should have learned by now that wisdom and worth are not determined by the job someone does, but by the character they show. Clearly, that is a lesson you have failed to learn. She paused, letting the words sink in, then continued. And if we are discussing competence, I should point out that you used the wrong honorific level when addressing your colleagues earlier. For business associates of equal standing, the respectful form would be more appropriate. But then, perhaps accuracy is less important to you than the sound of your own voice. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Takashi Yamamoto's face went completely white. His mouth actually fell open, his eyes going wide with shock. For the first time all evening, maybe for the first time in years, he was speechless. This was a man who commanded boardrooms full of powerful executives, who'd built a business empire through sheer force of will, who was used to controlling every situation he entered. And a waitress had just intellectually dismantled him in his own language. The two junior executives looked like they'd seen a ghost. Their faces went pale, then red, then pale again. They stared at Sarah, then at their boss, then back at Sarah, their minds unable to process what had just happened. They'd laughed at her. They'd been complicit in mocking her. And she'd understood every word. From across the dining room, Victoria's wine glass slipped from her fingers, catching it just before it fell. Her mouth hung open in shock. Mr. Peterson, who'd been approaching the table to check on things, stopped dead in his tracks. He didn't understand Japanese, but he understood body language. He understood that something massive had just happened, that the power dynamic had just shifted in a way he couldn't comprehend. Other diners at nearby tables had stopped eating, sensing the tension, watching this extraordinary moment unfold. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy. Sarah stood there, her head high, her gaze steady and unwavering. She'd said what needed to be said. She defended her dignity in the language of the man who'd tried to steal it from her. Yamamoto's shock was slowly transforming into something else. The color was returning to his face, but it wasn't the pale coldness from before. There was a flush creeping up his neck, a mixture of embarrassment and something that looked almost like respect. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, uncertain. He spoke in Japanese, the language of their confrontation. "Who are you?" he asked. It was the same question, in any language. But this time, it wasn't dismissive. It was genuine. He was truly asking, who was this person who'd just shattered his assumptions about the world? Sarah met Takashi Yamamoto's gaze without flinching. She responded in the same flawless Japanese, her voice calm and measured. "My name is Sarah Williams. I am your server this evening." The simplicity of her answer was powerful. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't backing down. She was stating a fact, claiming her identity, refusing to let him define her by his expectations. Yamamoto leaned back in his chair, studying her with completely new eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by intense curiosity. "That is not what I asked," he said, still in Japanese. "Where did you learn to speak like this?" Sarah took a quiet breath before answering. "I spent a year in Tokyo on a full academic scholarship, studying at Waseda University. I lived with a host family in Setagaya. My research focused on the social linguistics of honorific speech patterns in modern Japanese society." She watched his face as she spoke. Waseda University was one of Japan's most prestigious institutions. The detail about honorifics was pointed. She was reminding him that she'd noticed his mistake, that she wasn't just fluent, she was educated in the deep structures of his language. Yamamoto's expression shifted again. There was something in his eyes now that looked almost like pain. Shame, perhaps, or the uncomfortable recognition of his own cruelty being reflected back at him. One of his executives, the younger one, cleared his throat and tried to smooth things over, speaking in Japanese. "Sir, perhaps we should just continue with the—" "Be quiet," Yamamoto snapped, cutting him off. Then he said something that made the young man's face go red with humiliation. "You laugh like a fool at my joke. You are just as guilty of disrespect as I am. Perhaps more, because you should have known better." The executive shrank back in his seat, thoroughly chastised. The other associate stared down at his plate, clearly wishing he could disappear. Mr. Peterson, unable to stand the confusion any longer, hurried over. "Is everything all right? Miss Williams, if there's a problem." "Everything is fine, Mr. Peterson," Sarah said quietly, switching back to English. "We were just discussing the menu." But Peterson could see it wasn't fine. The whole atmosphere had changed. He looked between Sarah and Yamamoto, completely lost. Perhaps I should assign another server. No, Yamamoto said sharply in English, his accent heavy. She stays. Peterson backed away, confused and frightened, leaving them in their strange standoff. Yamamoto continued to study Sarah, and she could see his mind working, calculating. He was a businessman above all else. He recognized value when he saw it, even when it came in an unexpected package. He gestured to the empty chair at the table. "Sit down," he said in English. Sarah shook her head. "I'm working, sir." "I can't. I am making it a business meeting," he interrupted. "Sit. Please." That last word, please, seemed to cost him something. It wasn't a word he used often. Sarah hesitated. This was completely against restaurant policy. But something in his tone had changed. The coldness was still there, but there was also genuine interest, and perhaps the beginning of something like respect. She sat down, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Across the dining room, she could feel Victoria's furious stare burning into her back. Yamamoto switched back to Japanese, speaking more carefully now, more respectfully. "My company is expanding in Europe. We are buying properties, developing them, working with local businesses. It is complicated work. Cultural differences cause problems. Misunderstandings cost money and time." He paused, choosing his words. "I have translators. I have many translators. But they translate words only. They do not translate meaning. They do not understand the space between what people say and what they actually mean." Sarah listened, beginning to understand where this was going. "I need someone who can do more than translate," Yamamoto continued. "Someone who understands culture deeply. Someone who can tell me when a British business partner says, 'That's interesting,' but really means absolutely not. Someone who can help my Japanese team understand why their direct communication style offends Europeans. Someone who can bridge the gap." He looked directly at her. "Someone like you." Then he switched to English, perhaps to make sure there was no misunderstanding. "I am offering you a position with my company. You would work with my international development team. 6 months in London, then 6 months in Tokyo. The salary would be £60,000 per year, plus housing assistance." Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. £60,000. That was more money than she'd ever imagined earning, especially straight out of university. It was freedom from debt, from struggling, from counting every penny. It was the kind of opportunity people dreamed about. But it was being offered by the man who, just minutes ago, had called her useless and stupid. "Why?" she asked simply in Japanese. "Why would you offer this to me after what you said?" For the first time, Yamamoto looked uncomfortable. He glanced down at his hands, then back at her. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, less certain. "Because you did something no one in my company does. You told me the truth. You showed me my mistake. Everyone who works for me is afraid. They tell me what I want to hear. They laugh at my jokes even when they are not funny. They never challenge me." He gestured to his 2 associates, who were staring at their plates. "Look at them. They will go back to the office and tell everyone how brilliant I was tonight. They will never mention that I made a fool of myself. This is how empires fall, when no one tells the emperor he is wrong." He leaned forward slightly. "You are not afraid of me. That is rare. That is valuable. More valuable than 100 yes men." Sarah sat there in that expensive restaurant, her heart racing, her mind spinning with possibilities and doubts. £60,000. A real career. The chance to use everything she'd learned, everything she'd worked so hard for. But at what cost? "I need time to think about this," she said quietly in English. Yamamoto nodded slowly. There was respect in that nod. He'd expected her to jump at the offer, and the fact that she hadn't impressed him even more. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, sleek and minimal. He wrote something on the back. "Come to my office tomorrow morning at 9. This is the address. We will discuss the details." He paused, then added, "And Miss Williams? Do not be late." With that, he stood up. His 2 associates scrambled to their feet as well, eager to escape. Yamamoto pulled out several large bills and placed them on the table. Far more than enough to cover the meal and a generous tip. He looked at Sarah one last time, and there might have been the ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Then he was gone, striding out of the restaurant with his entourage trailing behind him. Sarah sat there for a moment longer, the business card heavy in her hand. The dining room was completely silent. Every eye was on her. Mr. Peterson rushed over, his face purple with confusion and anger. Williams, what on earth was that about? You sat at a customer's table. I quit, Sarah said simply, standing up. The words came out before she'd even fully decided to say them, but once they were out, she knew they were right. I'm giving you my notice. Effective immediately. Peterson sputtered. You can't just. But Sarah was already walking away, heading toward the staff room to collect her things. Behind her, she could hear Victoria's voice, sharp and venomous. She probably offered him something, that's what happened. That's the only way someone like her could. Sarah didn't turn around. She didn't need to. Let Victoria think what she wanted. None of it mattered anymore. That night, Sarah barely slept. She lay in her small flat, staring at the ceiling, the business card on her nightstand. Her mind wouldn't stop spinning. Could she work for him? For a man who'd said such terrible things about her? Would accepting his offer mean accepting that his behavior was okay? Would she be betraying herself, selling out for money? But another voice in her head argued back. The money wasn't just for her. It would help her mom, who'd worked 2 jobs for years to help Sarah get through school. It would mean Sarah could finally pay off her student loans. It would mean security, opportunity, a real future. And maybe, just maybe, working for Yamamoto wouldn't be selling out. Maybe it would be something else entirely. Maybe she could be a voice of honesty in his world of yes-men. Maybe she could help him see people differently, treat people better. Maybe she could make a real difference. She thought about her year in Tokyo, about the Tanaka family who'd shown her such kindness, about how much she'd loved the culture, the language, the way of thinking. This job would let her bridge 2 worlds she cared about deeply. As dawn broke over London, Sarah made her decision. She showered, dressed in the most professional outfit she owned, a simple navy dress and blazer she'd bought secondhand, and made her way across the city. The Yamamoto Property Group headquarters was a tower of steel and glass in Canary Wharf, impressive and intimidating. Sarah walked through the gleaming lobby, gave her name to the receptionist, and was whisked up to the top floor in an elevator that moved so fast her ears popped. Yamamoto's office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Thames. He was standing by the window when she entered, his back to her. He didn't turn around immediately. You came, he said in Japanese. I did, Sarah replied in the same language. But I have conditions. Now he turned, one eyebrow raised. Conditions? Sarah stood tall, channeling every bit of courage she had. First, I will never accept being spoken to disrespectfully. Not in English, not in Japanese, not in any language. I'm happy to receive professional feedback, but I will not tolerate being demeaned. Yamamoto's face was unreadable. She continued. Second, I'm finishing my degree. I need some flexibility in my schedule for the next few months to complete my coursework. My work for you won't suffer, but my education is important to me. And third, she said, the housing assistance you mentioned. I'd like part of it to be used differently. I want you to create a scholarship fund for language students at London University. Students who want to study abroad but can't afford it. Call it the Yamamoto Cultural Exchange Scholarship. She held her breath. She'd asked for the impossible, demanding respect from a man known for his harshness, and asking him to spend money on something that had no business value whatsoever. The silence stretched out painfully. Then, slowly, Takashi Yamamoto began to smile. It was a real smile, not the cold smirk from the night before, but something genuine and warm. Miss Williams, he said in English, you are even more formidable than I thought. He walked to his desk and pulled out a folder. I accept your conditions. All of them. The scholarship is actually a good idea, good publicity for the company. He pushed the folder toward her. This is your contract. Read it carefully. Take it to a lawyer if you wish. If you are satisfied, sign it and start on Monday. Sarah took the folder with shaking hands. She'd done it. She'd walked into the lion's den and not only survived, but came out with exactly what she wanted. As she turned to leave, Yamamoto spoke again, this time in careful, respectful Japanese. Miss Williams? Thank you. For last night. For showing me what I had become. I needed that wake-up call. Sarah looked back at him and saw something she hadn't expected to see. Humility. We all need reminders sometimes, she said gently. About what really matters. About treating people with dignity. 3 years later, Sarah wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. She'd helped Yamamoto Property Group successfully expand across Europe, bridging cultural gaps and preventing countless misunderstandings. She'd earned the respect of everyone in the company, not because of her title, but because of her wisdom and her unwavering integrity. And the Yamamoto Cultural Exchange Scholarship? It had sent 20 students abroad to study languages and cultures. 20 young people who, like Sarah, had the passion and intelligence but not the money. 20 futures changed. As for Yamamoto himself, he was still tough and demanding. But he was different too. More thoughtful. More aware of how his words affected people. He'd learned that real strength isn't about making others feel small. It's about lifting people up. Sarah's story reminds us of something powerful. Your worth is not defined by your job title or your uniform or what other people think of you. Your worth comes from who you are inside. Your knowledge, your dignity, your courage to speak truth even when it's frightening. Sometimes the people who seem the most powerful are actually the most fragile. And sometimes the people who seem powerless have a strength that can change everything. One moment of courage, one perfect response at exactly the right time, can open doors you never imagined possible. Sarah didn't just defend herself that night at the royal table. She changed the course of her entire life. She proved that true power doesn't come from money or status. It comes from knowing your own value and refusing to let anyone diminish it. And that's a lesson worth remembering, no matter what language you speak. If this story touched your heart, remember, you are worthy of respect. Your dreams are valid. Your voice matters. Never let anyone convince you otherwise.